Hey, can we just call her back? Hey, Julie? Could you come back for a moment?
Do we need to be back in executive session for this?
Oh, Julie, you had mentioned you didn't care that whether it was confidential or not.
No.
So let's treat it as non-confidential we can, but it just makes it easier, we don't have to be bouncing around. And then we can do our little paragraph and just put it on with.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, we need a motion to.
Is that moved? What am I seconding?
Yeah, what was the motion? I didn't finish.
Oh, I thought German, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, as I recall, I think part of our discussion was you needed a motion to give a response back and say
Sure.
we don't have the jurisdiction for this particular thing and do the advice that was previously discussed.
So moved. Second.
And could we identify the delicately of this?
No, I'll write that one.
Oh, you want to write it?
Oh, I was going to say even, okay,
Okay.
sure.
Because Glinda is
Are you looking at me?
because Glinda's backed up a little bit.
Well, I
She
thought
was-
this
she
was
has-
still going up some even.
Because Glinda has stuff she was going to give it to us this time, right?
No, not this time. I specifically made that very clear. I do have a draft about 2/3 of the way.
Okay. So
Progress is being-
we get to go back to our agenda unless, if we're not done with this.
I'm not well. No, not well. Were we going to mention the PMP in that paragraph also?
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Well, I was thinking
I think you should,
of
yeah.
going through that code section
Code
and
section.
reiterating that these kind of and this is why I think it might be worth it to get back it on,
Yeah,
on the
PMP.
web then, because like again
Yeah.
to reiterate, regardless of how noble the intentions are, that the code does not prohibit this kind of use of municipal resources unless you get permission from the mayor.
It does prohibit, unless you get it.
That's right. And
Right.
so just to make it clear to like
Yeah.
both to Julie that the default, because I think you could see from Julie's presentation that she was under the impression that it would by and large be okay because it was charitable, because it was sort of off-duty time, and
But
it
you
was
still need
charitable,
someone to sign off on it.
and it was non-political, that made it okay, but the code, I think, is
Yeah.
right on point on that
Yeah.
it's not allowed unless you get special permission from the assembly.
Well,
And not
I
just
think it's worth reiterating.
Well, not
that.
just the agency, but somebody representing
Well, and that's
the mayor
actually,
or
I'll mention it, because you're right, because that
It's
becomes,
not
just
just-
because I have my supervisor's approval.
Exactly, and that's what was interesting to me, because when I asked you earlier about agency head, that's like saying your agency is approving your own conduct, and so you
Right.
need somebody outside of that agency to be able to do that, and that's what the code specifically directs, outside of the PMP. So I think that's an important distinction.
And see, the agency head wouldn't necessarily be aware of the code section,
Right.
so they're dealing with the PNP.
Right.
That says that they give
Right.
it permission.
So that's, I think, a significant value to
Yeah, that's a good point.
our paragraph.
Well, you're right. You took the PMP out of context and took out like the
Yeah.
authorization part of it, and just said,
Right.
what's the
Right.
substance of the decision? Oh, okay, tip, it meets these criteria, so
Exactly.
it's okay.
So I think that actually.
Well, that's good.
is-
I'll clarify that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're right. Because maybe at least some people are looking at that PMP as if it's the code,
Mhm.
and then saying it's okay
And, you know,
if it satisfies
and maybe the
these
PNP
criteria.
should be modified to reflect that, because, I mean, this is the guidance that our directors have, and so they're looking at it and thinking that they can authorize it, and if we're gonna, there's a disconnect, so we gotta fix one of the two.
It would be wise to then refer them to the
Right,
appropriate
exactly.
section in the code.
Or something. We'll try to figure that out.
Okay, great. So we're back to 5A. Disclosure, oh, lovely, more disclosure forms. Do we want to go through those, or just is it the wish of the board to go straight into?
There's
NLPD?
actually no disclosures,
Oh,
of gift disclosures this time. It's just the review of the letter,
The
and I
letter
think
that
you're going to
that's my
postpone that.
The new code letter?
yeah, there's a new code letter that's trying to explain the new code. And it's a cover letter that's gonna go to the principals.
Will it be with the inappropriate disclosures, that inappropriate acceptance of gifts? I didn't say that right.
Right, what I meant is that basically it's a cover letter going to all of the heads of the schools to let them know that just to kind of summarize the changes in the code, right?
Oh, I thought it was
Is
when
that
we
what I was
got a
reading?
disclosure that we were not giving the exception to. That was going to be the new letter that went to them and the principal.
Such as, as an example, one we received or somebody
As
got.
an example, the one we have in here still to deal with, Christina Fernandez,
Which is the
which
church
is that was the $80
Oh, I
beauty
see.
salon.
I see, right, yeah, if you
So
look
we
on
need to have a
page
letter
2,
to
it says
not
you're getting
accept.
this because a member
Oh,
of
I
the
see.
staff.
So this is the letter that's going to go after each violation.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
To the person disclosing and to their principal.
Okay.
Is
Gotcha. Oh, so this is the new. I understand now. All right. I'll take a look at that.
So we can go on to, I believe the only other disclosures are the present economic interest.
Which is which section?
It's still in 5A, but it's the yellow paper. And the ones at the front are new, and you can take a look at those. But then when we get back to Miller, Terry has a letter that you asked him to write to Mr. Miller.
Well, as an example, this one here,
Is
the
it the
top
one for
one.
electeds? I don't have any.
Oh, just you're still in
Oh, it
5A.
might be the next golden
After the
rod
goldenrod.
is disclosures on boards.
Keep going, it's after the goldenrod paper,
Yeah,
as opposed
it's-
to the yellow. Our paper is goldenrod.
Just. Are you? There it is. You're on it, Glenda.
This
Right
one?
there. Those are the
Church.
disclosures of present economic interest.
Wait a minute, why? Yeah, why is yours goldenrod and ours is just yellow?
I don't,
Ours are yellow. Is yours goldenrod?
I was looking at
It's like
the
language
still
in the
gifts,
stripes.
so,
Okay.
Chevron.
Self-appointed.
Totally so.
I remember that.
You're not there, David.
I was right here. Did we go past this?
So
Yeah.
there's nothing behind the one for elected officials, right?
No,
That's
nothing.
supposed to be that way.
Right.
What am I looking for? This letter?
You're looking for disclosures of present economic interest. So go past,
Why did we skip these?
because that's Christina Fernandez. We need to send her a letter, so we have to have a
well, it's
letter.
Catherine Longlet and Christina
And
Fernandez.
Christina Fernandez.
Oh, okay.
So we want to send letters to them, but we don't have a letter yet. Gotcha. Okay, now I'm with you. All right.
So then we go to
Then
the,
we're skipping on to these.
yes.
Okay.
Well, can we rule on William Falsey since he works for,
This is the person that would be joining this board.
yeah. Well, we ruled on each other here before.
Well, they all said. Oh.
We pretty much all said there's nothing really of a conflict, other than he works with Simon and Evans.
Well, as an attorney, if you look at two things, one is confidentiality, and he's certainly trained in that. He's not gonna disclose confidential matters here to his law firm or to Bill Evans. And other than that, it's a small town, everybody knows each other. So,
Hell, this man lives next door and we don't discuss this stuff.
I mean, unless it's,
And Bill has served on the board before.
On this board?
He is actually,
I didn't know that.
I came onto the board to replace Bill midway through his term when he left
Oh.
to go to Washington DC.
This Bill Falsey.
Bill Falls, so he will actually know some of the history before me about.
But he didn't work at Cedar Windlet.
No, he worked for the Department of Interior.
well, so that's interesting, so he's been on the board.
Yeah, so so as a matter of disclosure, I was close friends with Bill, and so you know, when I heard Ted had resigned, I knew he had been on it before and only left. He found it interesting, and had only left because he was leaving the state. And so I said, "Hey, you want to apply?" According to him, he submitted his application at 2:53, and at 3:15, he got an email saying, "Congratulations, on your appointment to the board."
Well, and for your information, they've also found somebody to replace Steve already.
Oh, already? Okay.
the person they're looking at, as a former APOC vice chair.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's very high-powered board.
Yeah.
With a lot of legal background. She's not a lawyer,
She's
but
a paralegal. A former paralegal.
probably really good
Oh, but at
at
least-
drafting stuff.
Oh, but at least she's a woman, so it won't be.
Oh, five white guys?
Telling,
And we're gonna have more
telling that
bloodsuckers.
poor man up on the hillside what to do.
And we're gonna have more than just one bloodsucker. We're gonna have several.
So does anybody have
What do
any
you call
issues
it,
with,
bloodsucker?
with any of these
Oh, yeah.
disclosures?
No.
Okay, that was.
No, what is this is urban design.
This is the Joseph Miller one, and Terry has a letter that you
Yeah.
asked him to write.
Yeah, as I recall, I think. Oh, I should
Oh, there it is.
I had to go back into my memory, but I think what we were motivated by was just the line saying, you know, that there's clearly a potential for various conflicts to come up on survey. And I think it was the line that sort of like, well, if something comes up, I'll disclose it.
Mhm.
And I think the idea was, you know, maybe we should just write him a letter saying, yeah, it's a little bit more than that. It shouldn't just be sort of like disclosure, and then let's move on. We've had some previous to you guys. Oh, you were there. Remember, you were there for the,
Oh, yeah.
you know, where everyone was sort of like disclose and then move on. No one would even vote. I mean, in other words, like people serving on some of these boards and commissions were under the impression that you just disclose and then you just plow on as if nothing happened. So we figured it would be good to write a letter, so like clarifying what precisely you should do, and that disclosure is not enough. And so, you know, to be honest, when I got done this thing, I thought this might not be a bad idea, just sort of like to send back to people after they submit this kind of conflict of interest stuff anyway for boards and commissions, saying, you know, a letter like this saying like, great, welcome to board commission. By the way, here's the stuff for conflict of. It could be kind of like a more generic version of this.
Because, yeah, we had we had people who were, they would disclose an issue, and then they would testify on behalf of the issue that they were discussing, and then they'd go back and they want to rule on that issue. We went like,
The disclosure is not the cure.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
That's the first step.
And I think that's like a widespread,
Right.
you know,
As long
mistake
as
that
I reveal myself, then I can participate as if I had not revealed myself.
well, unless you work for the state legislature.
Well, I should say, and that's why it's in some cases, in a lot of cases, it's an honest mistake, because there's various professions and there's various situations in which that is precisely what happens, that you disclose and then you just plow on as if it didn't, you know, as if nothing mattered.
On the other hand, the assembly's been pretty good about it. If you disclose, they let you recuse yourself. In fact, they get up and leave.
Well, but I think one clarification here is, on the assembly at least, when they think they have a conflict, they disclose it. They do not recuse themselves. The assembly votes on it.
Mhm.
And that's to keep assembly members from not voting on things they don't want to vote on. So that unless the body says, we agree that you have a conflict that can't be managed, you are excused. So the assembly person's not given that power to recuse. So this breaks it into the recuse business, but, so I'm not, so when I was looking at that while you were talking, thinking, well, I bet for the boards and commissions and some others that if you have a conflict, you should disclose it. You don't just recuse yourself, you disclose it. And you may express your opinion that you think you should be recused, but the board, the rest of the group votes on it. So it's just an interesting nuance.
Well, it is. I mean, because it seems to me, you know, and I'd have to go back and look at the language for these, you know, because for boards and commissions, there is this specific language that, you know, it's specific, you know, that you are expected to be impartial, right? You know, and then I mean, it's like, to some degree, we really don't ask assembly political officials to do that, right? We expect them to write in various sorts of ways. And so that would be the one wrinkle that I sort of added. That was sort of like my interpretation of that section of the code is the idea that if you believe that you yourself have a conflict of interest, then you should recuse yourself.
Mhm.
If you're on the bubble, you should disclose, and then let the board or commission decide whether you should participate or not.
And
But,
again, Terry, I'm not sure that's true, so maybe I can look at that real quick.
Yeah, if you want, yeah. Yeah,
It's
we don't-
certainly not true at the assembly level,
That's right.
and nobody you send this to is gonna pick up that.
Right.
Well, that's remember, this would be for boards and commissions, right?
But we want to be
So-
consistent, though.
Yeah.
To make
Well,
sure.
no, and what we've done in practice here is if we felt we
I don't mean
had a
consistent with
conflict,
assembly, but consistent with interpretation.
Yeah.
we've disclosed our conflict, even though we've had a vote on that, individual members have abstained from voting. That doesn't mean you didn't participate in the discussion, but you still abstained from voting on an issue.
And you know, and that I think is actually incorrect, and I've told that to, for instance, another commission recently, that if you're conflicted, not voting isn't enough, that you don't discuss. So I think that's actually not proper.
That's right, it should be further than that.
But let me do this,
But
if I could, for 2 minutes,
Of course,
let's
yeah,
check
we
in this.
don't have to do
talk
it, we don't have to
Terry
decide this
and-
today, this
Yeah,
has been
let me
floating
look at
around
it.
for a while, but, yeah,
Yeah.
because I would like to, because I do think, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I see the logic of it, like, in political context, like, on the assembly, but otherwise, I do think that, if a person in their own heart thinks, I can't be impartial about this, then I think the code, because it specifically says for boards and commission members that they have an obligation to be impartial, then that person should recuse themselves there, and then certainly, and I don't think any of us are too crazy about the idea of people being forced to participate and vote on a matter where they themselves say, in my own heart of hearts, I don't believe I can be impartial about this.
And then the commission says, oh, don't worry about it.
Or even worse, no, we won't let you
Yeah.
be recused, right?
Well, that's what's happened in the legislature. You got two people who work for an oil company who say, I really probably, they disclose it, and then, so now we get to vote on that issue because an initiative has been proposed
That's right.
on that.
And I'm not crazy about that, but at least I can see Dee's logic. I can see the logic of saying in political context where there's a lot of controversial issues where politicians might not want to vote on them and they might use the ethics thing as a dodge.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's not sufficient reason for that policy, but I at least see it. I don't think boards and commissions, and I might be wrong, I don't think boards and commissions have that kind of issue. These are not, by and
Right.
large, political officials running
And
for
they're mostly,
re-election and seeking.
their recommendations or advisory.
Right.
Occasionally they're acting in an adjudicatory capacity, and then, of course, it's a lot stricter conflict of interest analysis. Okay, so let me look
Take a
at
look
it
at
for 2 minutes.
we
or
don't
less.
have to do it today.
Yes, I
Yeah. But anyway, and if anyone else has any comments in the letter, I would say that's probably that was sort of like the only sort of like the controversial thing that I added to it. The rest of it's just my effort to sort of explain what I think the code actually says. That one bit about recusal is my interpretation of what the code.
Well, and this is
require.
something I think all the boards sort of wrestle with, and it may be in our spare time if we ever could get a sort of a 2-page package to go to the staffers for the boards, that at the very first staff meeting when there's that sort of theoretical ethics training, is to have, okay, this is what disclosure means. And you would also have, what a personal interest is, what a financial interest is, the definitions laid out. Because I'm not sure that is laid out. And so, anyway, that's probably the biggest number one issue the boards wrestle with, and probably don't have enough guidance on it.
Oh yeah, by the way, so, and page 2 of this letter is just excerpts from the code.
Oh, it's on the back here?
Yeah, it's on the back, on the criteria of substantial financial interest.
There is a requirement that there be a vote taken in certain instances for boards when it involves financial interest. If members of the appointed body by the majority vote determine that a financial interest is substantial or the personal involvement is prejudicial, the member may not participate in the matter. And all of that has to be done prior to deliberation or decision on the issue.
Which was,
Yeah.
that was part and parcel of the previous case.
Well, and I'd say, and that's probably the other bit that I've added to this letter that's based on an interpretation of that particular case. That body was reading that to mean, if you think about it, if the body votes, then you can't participate. But if the body never votes, then there's no problem. So let's just disclose and then move on. You notice in this letter, I tried to make it clear in a couple places that if you're not sure, you should disclose, and then your body should deliberate and vote. In other words, it's more proactive.
Yeah,
It's
it
not,
is.
and if you happen, I think people read, if you happen to vote, and they vote against me, then I can't participate. What I'm trying to emphasize in the letter is that if you do disclose, then the board or commission should in fact hold a vote as to whether your interest is substantial or prejudicial.
And by the way, one thing I would recommend, Terry, is that we, on the back of this issue, define financial interest and private interest with the definition. So right under this,
Mhm.
you actually have the 2 definitions, because, one of them talks about employee and ownership and household. The average person doesn't know what financial or private interest matters.
Right, okay.
And just have those 2 definitions. And they're in 110. So anyway, yeah, we might get this put it into a little cheat sheet that we can send out to
That
the
might be
boards and
nice,
commissions.
yeah.
That
Which
would be
would be good, because we're coming up on that, we're gonna get a whole bunch of these things, hopefully, we're gonna get a whole lot of, from all the LURSs and TERSs and every board to get caught up on their sheets, which means next week or next month, we need to have, as a side effect, we all need to re-up on those.
Well, we need to get the municipal boards and commissions on board, because we got 100% for assembly.
I
boards.
understand that, but I'm talking about this board needs
Yeah,
to re-up.
we have to, by February 15th,
Yeah.
so that would be our next meeting.
Okay.
So I'll just bring them in, or send a form out to you guys. But should I work then on getting Stephanie back on board with?
Yes, let's
Okay.
figure that out.
Okay.
She seems to be very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
about it, so.
I think so too.
By the way, is Ted okay? Or is he-
Political campaigning.
Oh.
He's gonna team up with somebody.
With, coffee, right?
I
Yeah,
don't even know.
yes.
Okay. How good for him.
I called and talked to him.
Oh,
And, you know, he hadn't made his mind up until recently when Coffee came to him and says, I want you to help me, and then I want you to be on mine. Yeah.
Oh.
So, moving on, anything anymore on 5A? Move to 5B, we just a notice that we have a meeting here.
It's been canceled. It was canceled today, so we can just skip that.
Moving on, we've already done 5C. 5D, are we holding up from
I
our...
just read this is fascinating.
It's a new one.
Move to executive?
Yeah.